I'm just checking out my bromeliads. They have spent the entire winter in my greenhouse in the UK, and I've only warmed it to 4 degrees Celsius. And in this video, I'm going to show you how well they've coped. And all of these bromeliads are from countries with warmer climates. I grow Aechmea, Tillandsia, Billbergia and Neoregelia bromeliad. So there's a good range of plants here to show you how tolerant they can be, and I'm going to show you some of my favourites and give you tips on how to get bromeliads through cooler winters in colder countries so that you can enjoy that tropical and exotic foliage all year round. So Aechmea is where we're going to start. This genus of bromeliads are some of the biggest that I grow, and for that reason they haven't been that good at growing on the branches of trees, just because the sheer weight and size of them means that they're just going to fall off when that central rosette becomes full of water, which it so often does. Now this one is Aechmea blanchettiana, and it's the orange form. This is a super popular landscaping plant in places like Florida that has warm temperatures year round because they grow so large and they've got this beautiful orange colour, and they'll produce an enormous flower spike, again in shades of orange. Now this one is very rare to find in the UK. I actually had to import this one from Portugal, and it's an absolute beauty. Now you can see I've only got it growing with its root ball covered in kind of a ball of moss. That's because this was a smaller plant that I had growing mounted as an epiphyte on the trees in my garden last summer, and it did surprisingly well, but people did warn me that it grows big, and people are right. Shared knowledge is good. Now the reason that you can get away with just wrapping bromeliads root balls in something like sphagnum moss is because they are really well adapted to growing as epiphytes. So the root's primary purpose on these plants is just to attach it to a branch of a larger host tree. So you've all seen these pictures on, say, like a Attenborough documentary, and they pan through the canopy of a rainforest, and you'll see this type of plant growing all over the branches high up in the canopy, and they catch rainwater in this central rosette, absolutely full of water. They are so good and so well adapted to that environment, and you'll also get leaf litter and all sorts fall into here, and that's how they uptake most of their nutrients and water. Now another Aechmea that I grow, which is vicious, so I'm handling it carefully out of shot here and making a right mess behind camera, is this. Now this is Aechmea orlandiana and a cultivar called ensign. Just look at the patina on those leaves. Now one of my favourite things about this bromeliad is these almost neon red spikes going down the edge of the leaves. It's absolutely stunning. Now this one, again, I've got it growing, as I would say, terrestrially. So it's in a container, and although I say terrestrial, I don't mean soil. The mix is more like orchid bark. This is actually a mix of orchid bark, multi-purpose compost, and a bit of perlite. So it's really open and free draining, and that just mimics that environment on those rainforest canopy trees that I was talking about, where leaf litter, bark, branches would fall into the crux of a tree, and a seed or a pup off of one of these bromeliads would land in that spot, germinate, root, and then grow away, catching all that beautiful tropical rainwater and leaf litter. Now these two have been growing on the top shelf of my greenhouse behind me here, which is why they've coloured up so beautifully. And that was going to be my first tip for growing bromeliads through winter, especially if you're in a country like me where daylight hours and ambient temperature just completely drops away. If you can put them as high as possible, they're going to maximise that amount of sunlight that we do get. So at the top of the greenhouse is the brightest spot. So my bromeliad, to be honest, right now are looking better than they did in summer because they were partially shaded under the canopy of the trees then. Now they have coloured up beautifully. Who doesn't love a colour changing plant? Now the next sort of bromeliad that I want to introduce you to is Billbergia. Billbergia are fantastic bromeliads for colour. They come in so many colourful forms with these really beautiful speckled leaves. Now this one is a cultivar called Afterglow, and again I've only got the root ball of this wrapped in moss because it was mounted onto a tree in the summer in my garden. But as with the Aechmea, these are getting far too big now to kind of safely tie onto the trees, because the slightest bit of wind or rainfall that fills up that central rosette, they're just dropping on the ground, and I don't want that. It doesn't look pretty and it makes more work for me. So I'd recommend growing Billbergias in that orchid bark mix that I've got my larger Aechmeas growing in, because they tend to grow quite tall as well. You can see the shape of this, it's much more upright and tubular. So I will be potting all of my Billbergia into kind of an orchid bark open mix with a bit of compost just to add nutrients, but not a lot, because I have mistakenly planted them into compost before and the roots just rotted away and that rot just spread out through the plant, and I don't want that. If you can get the potting mix right, these plants are resilient. There's not much else they're going to ask you for. There are more standard forms of Billbergia too. This is a simpler form called Elegance. And this, you can see how readily it has multiplied itself. This is another reason actually that I love growing Billbergia plants, because, or any Bromeliads, because they vegetatively, I might have put an extra syllable in that, vegetatively, who knows, reproduce. They produce offsets like banana plants, and the offsets are called pups. So you can see here, this Billbergia, there's the main parent plant in the middle, and these pups have come off the side. And you can just chop those with a pair of secateurs and they will be ready to root and become their own plant. And they're tough, they don't need any special care really. If you could just wrap the roots in moss and let the cut end callus over, you're ready to go. One thing that is worth mentioning is that when a Billbergia or any Bromeliad has flowered, normally the central rosette will die, and then they'll produce those pups, those offsets that I've just shown you. So there's an example here. This was Billbergia Casablanca, and it produced a beautiful flower in my garden last year. And I cut back that main rosette because it started going brown and dying back. Because it had flowered, that's fine. And this is exactly what I mean. Once you cut it back, you get little offsets like this. So even though one plant has flowered and died, they will clone themselves and you'll have more and more plants to enjoy year after year. Now the other type of Bromeliad that I grow is one that works so well, grown as an epiphyte mounted onto trees, because it stays smaller. It stays much more compact. So it's really, really well suited to growing high up on the branches of other trees. And if you're in the UK or anywhere growing a garden where you want a tropical style garden, having Bromeliads on the branches of your trees is just magical. People don't expect it when they walk into your garden, and it really elevates that exotic look. So I've been growing mine up high in the greenhouse, as I said earlier, just mounted look. So I've got the sphagnum moss on the root ball, then a bit of metal wire, and I just hook them on bars and they hang like this from the top of the greenhouse. The rosette catches the water when I'm coming in and spraying with a hose pipe, and they have just absolutely loved it up there. I've not done any more care. Now the good thing with them being up high is that when the heater in the greenhouse does come on, or when the sun eventually comes out, all of the heat in the greenhouse rises. So that top part of the greenhouse is going to be the warmest part. So these exotics are absolutely loving life up there. But look at the colours on this one. So this is a cultivar called Neoregelia Hansen Mini, with its beautiful dark leaves and green speckles. You can see as well how it's sort of adjusted to its conditions. So it started growing like that, and then with the weight of the water, it's weighed it down, and it just corrects itself so that it's always going to catch incoming rainfall. Bromeliads are just such clever plants. Now let me show you what Neoregelia look like when they produce offsets. It's always a bit of a fiddle getting them down from there. So this one is, I picked the one with the hardest name to say, Neoregelia punctatissima, wide leaf, and then it's got a collection number. So it's a different form of punctatissima, got it right that time, and it's got these really nice stripes on the leaves. But you can see here it's producing offsets really, really readily. So there's a small one just there, there's a larger one here, and at first, I was going to come to this with my secateurs and cut it away so that I have more and more plants to spread around the garden. But in hindsight, I think it's going to look much better to have some established clumps like this with all of the offsets and pups attached, just to add, well, just to make everything look less new in the garden. Some things look established, even if they are going out for the summer and coming back in here for winter. But look how it's coloured up in that winter sun. It's absolutely beautiful. I'll hook down some more of these Neoregelia because I think these are some of the more widely cultivated plants because there are so many different colour forms, and because they're small, more people can grow them. I can't hang that one back up. Oh, this is a nice one. It's worth it, trust me. Oh, I've tied this wire in knots. There we go. Look at that. Neoregelia, and this is a cultivar called Iris. Again, happily producing offsets. I forget how much water these hold, so every time I'm tipping it down, I get wet feet. I love that one. I think that's in my top 3 that I'm growing. There is one more that I'd quite like to show you, depending on how hard I've tied it to this bar. This is Neoregelia Antigone, or Antigone, with its really bright pink centre and producing offsets. Now you can just about see in there, Neoregelia have tiny little flowers right in the centre of the plant. They don't emerge out like they do on Aechmea and other Bromeliads. It's very neat tiny flowers in there, often in shades of purple, pink and blue. And this one did flower last summer, so I might have pictures to show you. If not, forgive me. And I've just realised this is producing pups off the back as well. Let me know if you'd be keen on seeing Bromeliads for sale in the Grow Paradise shop, because I'd love to grow my collection, and if I can share Bromeliads with you, then all the better. I've just seen there is an example of a Neoregelia pup that I have cut off from the parent plant. You can see how simple it is. That pup's just coming outside, snip with a pair of secateurs. This is now callousing over, and this is now a freestanding lone plant. I'm going to wrap this in moss and I will mount it to some trees in my garden in summer. Now the other type of bromeliad that I grow is sometimes called air plants, sometimes called Spanish moss. It's a really, really broad genus of bromeliads. So the first example is obviously this one that makes a good wig for men like me. Is the common name, Spanish moss, but it's not a moss and it's not Spanish. It's a bromeliad, and it's a genus called Tillandsia. This is a very, very popular form because you see it grown in, well, as a house plant. You see it grown in tropical gardens draped over the branches of bigger trees. Its species is Euxaninoides. And I also have an entire tray of other forms of Tillandsia. You can see how diverse this genus is. So there's actually one here, which is this one. Tillandsia Billbergia hybrid. Now this one actually will take 0 to -1 in a good microclimate in a mild garden. I sold most of these and I kept one back for myself. My mother's garden has one outside much bigger than this, and it's survived perfectly well, which is a promising sign. But you also have ones like this, which is just so nice. It looks like a sea anemone. Now this one is Tillandsia fuchsiae, variety fuchsiae, forma gracilis. Absolutely beautiful. And I've got one here that flowered last summer, so you can see how these Tillandsia flower. Now, I can't remember the name of this one. Look how beautiful that is. And it had purple flowers that emerged from this spike. Now, because this main plant over here flowered, just as I said before, if you look closely, you can see 2 new pups coming off the side. and they can just be separated away or left to form an established clump. And just as with all the other bromeliads, they cope completely fine. They're really well adapted to not having roots in soil. And these air plants actually are covered in tiny, tiny microscopic hairs all over the leaves that catch relative moisture in the air, and they'll hold on to that, and that's how they uptake their water. Now, most bromeliads say don't water them with, well, the bromeliads don't say, they don't talk to me, I've not gone that mad yet. The care labels for bromeliads say water them with rainwater, and ideally, yeah, that would be good. But I'll be honest, I water mine with tap water from the hose pipe, and that's been absolutely fine. It's not an issue at all. Right into the central rosette. And then with your air plants, whether it's this type or this type, anything in the Tillandsia genus, I'd recommend spraying with soft water like rainwater, or if you've got a water butt outside, just take them outside, dunk them into it on a warm day. You don't want to shock them with cold water, and they'll be covered in moisture then, held under those tiny hairs, and they'll take it in that way. I absolutely love bromeliads, as you can probably tell. Now, if you've already grown bromeliads, let me know what types you're growing, and if there's any colours that you'd like to add to your garden or attach them to the trees, let me know. I have actually done a video showing how mine looked in summer and how I attach them to the trees, so I'll put that in the description below. For the time being though, I think I'm going to have a go at dividing some and just enjoying the rest, and I will see you all in the next video.